Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining my breakout session, Appropriate Planning for Academic Success. My name is Shamika Allen. I'm the owner of Personalized Learning Solutions. In this breakout session, I'm going to give you some tips to help you prepare during and after your child's IEP or ARD meeting or 504 meeting. Here in the state of Texas, we call them ARD meetings. So let's jump directly into the presentation. Give me a few seconds to get set up. All right, so we're in the breakout session, Appropriate Planning for Academic Success. And I'm going to give you a little background about myself. Again, my name is Shamika Allen. I'm the owner of Personalized Learning Solutions. I have over 15 years of teaching and administration experience working with students and individuals with disabilities. I earned a Bachelor of Science in Education from the University of Arkansas in 1999 and a Master of Science with a specialization in adapted physical activity in 2005 from Texas Christian University. I still hold all of my educator certifications in the state of Texas, which include special education, physical education, and my principal or administrator certification. In my years in public education in Texas, I held many roles, including lead case manager, response to intervention coordinator at a middle school, special education team lead, administrator for a high school, district level vocational adjustment coordinator in 2 districts. Then as a teacher, I was a life skills teacher, content mastery teacher, homebound teacher, and home training. Now with my work with Specialized Learning Solutions, in addition, I am on staff with COPA, which is the Council of Parent Attorneys and Advocates. I'm currently a seat instructor and teaching assistant for their special education advocacy training, classes 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0. In addition, I was named to my state's Special Education Continuing Advisory Committee for Texas in December 2017, and I still serve on that committee. Now let's talk about the presentation objectives. In this breakout session, you're going to learn what actions to take and resources needed in order to properly prepare for your child's IEP meeting or 504 meeting. These are going to be tips and tools to help you increase your meaningful parent participation. Then I'm also going to give you some advice to help you appropriately plan and advocate before, during, and after the meeting. So as you can see, we have some cartoons coming up on the screen, and I think many of you parents have felt this way during the meeting. I survived the IEP meeting without the need for bail money or body bags. I'm all prepared for the IEP meeting. Cover me. I'm going in. So the point of my presentation today is to help you feel like you are an important part, in which you are under IDEA. You are a required member of your child's IEP or ARD meeting, but we just don't want you to have passive participation. We want you to have meaningful participation in your child's IEP and 504 plan meetings. So let's talk about the purpose of an IEP and 504 plan meeting. It is to tailor the educational plan for your child. Remember, the IEP is the cornerstone of a quality education for each child with a disability. The purpose of an IEP is to write a plan to help a student meet individual outcomes beyond his or her current skill levels. Now, the difference with 504 plans, 504 plans are formal plans that schools develop to give students who may have a disability that limits daily activities in a major way. Education is a daily activity. So the purpose of 504 plan is to remove barriers. So I want you to remember the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 that deals with 504 plans is a civil rights law, where the Individuals with Disability Education Act that governs IEP is a educational law. So remember, I know we still are a lot of post-COVID. Districts are catching up with a lot of things. Just remember, the federal disability laws still apply, even during post-pandemic. Just remember, however, the U.S. Department of Education did allow some flexibilities with these laws, especially when it came to evaluations. So just remember the Individual Disabilities Education Act, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and Title II of the American with Disabilities Act is all still in effect. So there have been some flexibility with in case of like evaluations, but a lot of districts should be caught up with things now. So what should you be doing now as you prepare for your child's either IEP, ARD meeting, or a 504 meeting? You need to stay in regular contact with your child's case manager or your contact teacher, all of your child's teachers, the rest of the IEP or 504 plan team. If your child has any related services, you need to know who those people are. You need to be making what I call an IEP or 504 binder, organizing your documents. If you prefer to do it online, you can use online document storage such as Google Drive or Dropbox. There's also one called Box.com. You would just create separate folders, like you would have divider tabs in the binder. So you could have a separate folder for IEPs, 504 plans, progress reports, evaluations, work samples. I also advise you to set up an email account just for communicating with school district personnel. This will make it easier when it comes to find meeting notices, copies of IEPs that are sent, any emails from teachers. And just as the school district is doing, I suggest as a parent you collect data. You can do anecdotal data. If your child has outside service providers, you can get them to give you reports, but you also want to collect data to take to your child's IEP or 504 meeting to help develop your child's IEP or 504 plan. That is also part of your parent participation and your parent input into your child's IEP or 504 plan. So what is in this binder? So there's several things that can be in this binder. So one, you have the most recent IEP or 504 plan, most recent FIE, full individual evaluation, or any evaluations from outside service providers. If your child has an IEP, you want to have copies of progress reports on IEP goals and objectives. And then you also want to have the most recent report card for even if your student has a 504 plan, you want to have their most recent report card. You want to have copies of work samples. If you're collecting data and you're using data collection sheets or you're doing anecdotal data and writing things out, you want to have that. You want to have a copy of your vision statement. This is basically a parent input statement. I'll call them vision statements, and I'm going to go over what that is later on in the presentation. And even though we're post-COVID, you still want to have a copy of any plans that changed your child's IEP during COVID. This is really going to come in handy when you start talking about compensatory services. And in many cases, districts call them many different documents. They were distance learning plans, continuity plans, emergency plans. I even saw students' IEPs change with prior written notices or IEP amendments. I would also have a parent contact log, and you can print out any copy of any important emails. I would also have a copy of your parental rights, which is your procedural safeguards. And then I always like to do this in person when we're having in-person meetings, and I know some parents are still going in-person meetings and some are still utilizing the virtual setting. I always have to have my parents have a copy of their student's picture in the front of the binder, so everyone knows the focus of this meeting, and to keep the focus on the meeting, even when we get in discussions that could be a little heated, the focus is this student here. So I like to have a picture of the student. So let's talk about a few things. How many of you have had an experience in an IEP or ARD meeting or 504 meeting where you barely spoke and participated? Maybe it seemed like the school personnel was speaking at you instead of to you. So let me talk about parent participation. Parent participation has always been a core tenet of IDEA, and that was re-emphasized with the Andrew F. Supreme Court decision in 2017. So I'm going to read you exactly what it says from Andrew F. about parent participation. It says this fact-intensive exercise will be informed not only by the expertise of school officials, but also by the input of child's parents and guardians. So that's what this presentation is about, helping you to increase your parent participation, helping you to prepare before a meeting, key tips and advice for during the meeting, and key things for you to do after the meeting that will help you overall increase your parent participation and have meaningful parent participation. So before we move on, we're next going to talk about virtual IEP, ARD, and 504 meetings. Remember now, as a part of COVID, IEP meetings do not have to take place in person. We all knew they could take place being conference calls, but as part of your parent participation, they have to give you alternate means of participating. Well, now that includes video conferences, okay? So the same principles apply to 504 plan meetings. Schools can choose to hold these meetings virtually by conference calls or in person. So as I'm talking a lot about parents' rights and parents' participation, we just don't want you to have massive participation. We want you to have meaningful IEP, meeting participation. So meaningful parent participation. So under the Individual Disabilities Education Act, so I'm particularly talking about for students who have an IEP, these are your rights as a parent. The right to receive notice. You must receive notice at least 5 school days before the meeting. You have a right to participate in all meetings concerning your child's education related to evaluation, identification, and education placement. You have a right to participate in all meetings related to the provision of a free and appropriate public education. You have the right to give consent to certain activities such as evaluation, changes in placement, and release of information to others. Parents are entitled to be a member of any group that decides whether their child is a child with disability and meets eligibility requirement for special education and related service. So again, this is what I'm saying. Parent participation has always been a core tenet of IDEA. This is minimally what school districts have to do to ensure your parent participation under Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. But what I want you to have is meaningful parent participation. So let's keep talking about your rights under IDEA for parent participation. You're entitled to be a member of the team that develops, reviews, and revises your child's IEP. You have equal partnership in decision making. Parents are entitled to be members of any group that makes placement decisions for your child. And you have a right to receive what we call the prior written notice on matters relating to identification, evaluation, and placement of your child, and also the provision of FAPE. We're going to talk in detail a little bit more about what is a prior written notice. And remember, IEP and ARD committees cannot have any type of meeting concerning your child's education without involving the parents being involved in the meeting unless the parent has given permission. So part of the statutes of IDEA concerning parent participation is that a school district must ensure that they have taken every step to ensure your parent participation. So that includes parent notices and phone calls. And if you need to reschedule, that means that meeting needs to be rescheduled at a mutually agreeable time to allow your parent participation. So let's talk about some mistakes parents make as they prepare for their child's IEP, ARD meeting, or 504 meeting. So as I go through this, think right now, what is the number one mistake you think parents make in preparation for an IEP, ARD meeting, or 504 meeting? Just think in your head, maybe what is the number one mistake you think parents make? So let's talk about some key preparation and tips to do before an IEP, ARD, or 504 meeting. First thing, you want to review your child's current records. You are the expertise on your child, but you also want to review all of the current school district records, whether that's an IEP, 504 plan, and full individual evaluation. You want to also review the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. Some states call them a PLAF, like we do here in Texas, or a PLOP, or a PLP. You also want to review what are the students' current measurable goals and objectives. And you also want to review the schedule of services, which is a statement of special education and related services. You want to prepare your parent input statement, but I call it more than a parent input statement. I call it a vision statement, and we're going to go over that in the next slide. You want to make sure that you prioritize your child's needs. You want to keep the focus on your child and not on the district's resources or your expectations. So now let's talk about that vision statement. Many times they ask for your parent concerns, or if you have a parent input statement. I have taken it a little further and I call it a vision statement. So what is a vision statement? It is a prepared statement that highlights what you hope your child will be doing in the next 1 to 5 years. It includes short-term goals, long-term goals. You can talk about interests of your child, strengths of your child. It helps to keep the meeting focused on your child's IEP. You always want to keep in mind long-term future goals. And usually when I have my parents write these, they give all of that information I just mentioned, but then the last paragraph is their actual concerns pertaining to their child's IEP. So I want them to give a little more information about the child, including future plans, what they want to do after high school, what are their career interests, and then we talk about parental concerns. Okay, so I call it a vision statement because it's a vision for the child. And then your child can also have an input in this. What are their current goals for school and career? And then I ask for this to be included in the present levels as part of parent input and part of the IEP. And you can also do this for 504 plan meetings. This is just not for IEP meetings. I have my clients that have students for 504 plans. We also have them write a vision statement for their child's 504 meeting. So what are some key preparation tips to do before an IEP, ARD meeting, or 504 meeting? One, you want to request an updated progress report. Remember, I had before saying you need to review your child's current IEP goals. So now you want to request an updated progress report on those goals, because before an annual ARD or IEP meeting, you want to ask for an updated progress report so you can review your child's current progress. You want to know if goals have been mastered or not mastered. And remember, if goals are not mastered, as I say all the time to my clients, they just don't disappear in the iCloud. Okay, they must be addressed in some new or proposed goal, but we don't want goals repeated word for word in the next IEP. They must utilize the progress the child has made, and they must address that non-mastered goal in some new form or fashion in a new proposed goals. You want to organize your binder, or you want to organize your online storage center of your child's paperwork. You want to prepare any accommodations, proposed recommendations, or questions. And then, even if your meeting is going to be virtually, you want to gather all needed items before the meeting, so you don't have to be running around the morning of the meeting. You want to make sure you have your binder or your online storage organized, a notepad, pens if you're going to record, water, snack. You want to have all that prepared to go, even if you're doing a virtual meeting or you're going in person. Okay. And then no matter what the meeting is, an IEP, ARD meeting, or a 504 meeting, you must be prepared to listen actively. So if you do these key preparation tips, it will help increase your meaningful parent participation. So now we talked about preparing for your child's meeting. You're reviewing their current documents. If your child has an IEP, you're getting a copy of proposed goals. You're getting an updated copy of progress reports. If you can get a draft copy of the present levels and a draft copy of accommodations. And you're reading all that and getting prepared, and you're making your recommendations for proposed accommodations, goals, and any questions you have. So now let's think, what is the biggest mistake you think parents make during an IEP, ARD, or 504 meeting? So think about your own personal meetings. What is the biggest mistake you think you've made? Okay. So now we talked about preparing for your meeting. and some tips for preparing for your meeting. What are some key actions to take during your child's IEP, ARD, or 504 meeting? One, when they ask, do you have any parent concerns? Read that vision statement to the committee. You can also supply them with a hard copy so they can follow along. You want to keep an open mind. You always want to ask questions and seek clarification if you're unsure about something. Also, do not let them talk to you in acronyms in the meeting. ESY, FBA, BIP. Make sure you understand what those acronyms mean. Focus on the outcome, which is getting the best IEP or 504 plan for your child. You want to make sure that you're attempting to sustain parent-school district relationships or parent IEP or 504 team relationships. You want to work to get along with everybody on the committee. I know times there are some personality conflicts. You also don't want to go into these meetings and be personally attacking staff members. You want to advocate for your child's rights respectively. You can be aggressive for getting the best IEP or 504 plan for your child, but you also want to refrain from any name calling, yelling, or personal attacks. If you feel you are getting upset, you have a right to ask for a recess so you can gather yourself and come back to the meeting so you can keep the outcome on your child. And then I told you need to be prepared to listen actively because there are going to be some things you hear in this meeting that you might not want to hear about your child. So we got to hear the positives as well as the negatives. So you got to be prepared to listen actively. More key actions to take. When you have a child with an IEP, you want to make sure you're working to design specific measurable goals. Because remember I told you want to review the current IEP goals and you want to get an update on progress. Well, you got to make sure you have goals that are written where you get measurable progress so you can see how that progress can be used to develop new goals. You do not want vague goals. So for instance, I have a vague goal is Jack will be able to attend in the classroom by increasing time on task. How much time on task? For how long? That's not a measurable goal. But then I wrote a measurable goal for Jack to attend on task that says by the end of 36 instructional weeks, when given activities or assignments at his functional level, Jack will increase his time on task so that he is attending to a task for 15 minutes at a time with no more than 2 verbal reminders and 3 out of 5 opportunities. From that goal, we know how much time Jack is attending to a task, we know how many verbal reminders or prompts it's taking, and we know how successful he is doing this in 3 out of 5 opportunities. So you want to make sure you're working with the IEP team to write specific, measurable goals. And remember that IEP goals are supposed to be goals that a child can master in an IEP year. Also remember, sometimes an IEP year, your child's IEP may include 2 grade levels. IEPs do not cover grade levels, they cover calendar years. So sometimes in your child's IEP, it's only 1 grade, and sometimes it's 2 grades. The next key action is try not to get into parental expectations versus district resources battle. Get what you need in your child's IEP or 504 plan, and then it is the district's responsibility to worry about how to implement that. If they have to hire more personnel, more speech therapists, more occupational therapists, or even additional teachers, that is their responsibility, not yours. You keep the focus on in the meetings, IEP or ARD meetings or 504 on your child. Also know that you do not have to sign the IEP if you do not agree with it totally. You can always look at it later. Same thing with the 504 plan. This is a tip that I give many clients. If you are going to disagree with the IEP or 504 meeting, do not sign your name and check disagree. Simply write disagree, and then you can give a statement of why you disagree with things in the IEP or the 504 plan. So now let's talk about some biggest mistakes parents make during IEP or ARD meetings or 504 meetings. Believing the professionals are the only experts. Yes, they are experts in education, but you are the expert on your child. Another big mistake is not making requests in writing. Even if you make a request in an IEP meeting and it's being recorded, still put that request in writing. Written requests initiate timelines. They also create a paper trail. Okay. So, for instance, here in the state of Texas, when you request an evaluation, it starts our 15, 40-day, 30-day timeline. The school has 15 school days to answer a request, 45 school days to complete the evaluation, and 30 calendar days to have the ARD meeting. So in the Individual Disabilities Education Act, that is a 60-day timeline. So you want to check your state if there are any specific timelines in your state. And as I just said, in IDA, the timeline for completion of evaluation is 60 days. That's the reason you always want to put things in writing, especially when it initiates timelines. That's one of the biggest mistakes I see parents make is they tell a teacher, oh, my child needs an evaluation and expects the timelines to start, or they mention it in an IEP or 504 meeting. You still want to put it in writing. Other biggest mistakes made by parents in IEP and ARD and 504 meeting, this one particularly relates to IEPs, not being familiar with the prior written notice. Okay, so when parents make a request for a child in IEP, the IEP ARD meeting is committed to documenting that in the prior written notice. The prior written notice must include very specific and detailed information when it comes to changes to your child's IEP. Remember, the prior written notice is what you will get after an IEP or ARD meeting that talks about the changes that are going to take place before the IEP is implemented. So I know sometimes that term is confusing because it's prior written notice. So you get a notice of your IEP or ARD meeting. That's not the same thing. The prior written notice is the notice that summarizes what you just talked about in the IEP or ARD meeting and before any of those changes or the IEP or ARD is implemented. Parental rights under IDA include the right to receive a prior written notice from the school each time the school proposes to take action, implement an IEP, or refuses to take certain action. So remember, the school must provide parents with a PWN each time it proposes to initiate or change the identification, evaluation, or education placement of your child's IEP, provisions to initiate or change the provision of your free and appropriate education FAPE to your child, refuse to initiate or change the identification, evaluation, or education placement of your child, or refuse to initiate or change the provision of FAPE for your child. Also in the prior written notice, it must also describe anything that you requested and the district refuses, okay? So let's talk a little more about prior written notice. The prior written notice should also include a description of any actions proposed or refused. So anything you propose and the district refuses, an explanation of why the district proposes or refuses to take certain actions, a description of other options the IEP or ARD team considered and reasons for rejecting those actions, a description of each evaluation procedure, assessment, or record, or report the school district used to make their rationale for taking certain action or actions, a description of other factors that are deemed relevant to the district's action or actions. It must include a statement informing parents they protected under IDA's procedural safeguards and also an explanation of what those procedural safeguards are and how to access them. And then also include any resource that parents may consult to get assistance in understanding the prior written notice. So the prior written notice is usually a document that's at the end of your child's IEP after the signature pages. So you must continue to read after you see those signature pages because this is where the prior written notice is. And if you disagree with anything in the prior written notice, you can write a statement of disagreement and what you want changed in the prior written notice. So let's talk about some other mistakes that parents make during an IEP, ARD, or 504 meeting. Allow an evaluation to be presented to you for the first time, even at a 504 meeting, okay? you request a copy of that evaluation ahead of time so you can digest it and you can make questions. It's very hard to digest and interpret an evaluation when you have someone reading it to you the first time in a meeting. Another mistake that parents make, especially with an IEP, accepting goals and objectives are not measurable. I talked about this before in a previous ARD. Measurable goals are data that can be included in the present levels. So if you don't have measurable goals and you can get measurable progress, how can the team develop new goals? Plus, you must use that measurable progress to help you develop new goals. And then another mistake that parents make, especially in reference to IEPs, is allowing placement decisions to be made before IEP goals and objectives are written. Many times after assessment have been discussed and reviews, the IE committee will try to determine a child's placement. Goals and objectives are always written and discussed before placement is discussed. A few more mistakes parents make during an IEP, ARD, or 504 meeting is you are requesting related services supports without documentation, without having an evaluation done. Frequently in IEP, ARD, and 504 meetings, committee will respond by stating the student does not need the service. And instead of requesting the related service, request the assessment to support the need. So then also accepting assessment reports or results do not recommend the services you think your child needs. If you do not agree with an evaluation report, you can request an independent education evaluation. And remember, this must be done in writing. Another mistake parents make is allowing your child's IEP meeting or 504 meeting to be rushed. If you don't have enough time to cover all of the legal requirements, you can stop and reconvene. And then the biggest mistake I see parents make in IEP, ARD, or 504 meetings is not asking questions. If you do not understand, ask for questions, ask for clarification. So let's talk about deliberation and meeting minutes. This goes for IEP, ARD meetings, or 504 meetings. Deliberation meetings, again, are not required by IDEA, but many states do them. They are intended to not be a verbatim script. They must reflect efforts made to solicit meaningful parent participation, and they must document parent concerns. Deliberation meeting must be read. I like them to be read and accepted by the committee, whether it's an IEP or 504 meeting. If there's a disagreement on a required element of the IEP related to support and services, that needs to be documented in the meeting. Deliberation and meeting minutes are another section of IEP. Should not be altered, even for 504 meetings. These should not be altered after the meeting is over. That's the reason you have them read during the meeting, and any changes need to be made at that time, but they should not be altering any deliberations from any meetings after the meeting is complete. So now let's talk about what is the most important item or task parents fail to do after an IEP or ARD meeting. So it kind of got you thinking about what's the biggest mistake parents make as they prep for an IEP, ARD, or 504 meeting. What's the biggest mistake they make during an IEP, ARD, or 504 meeting? And then what is the biggest mistakes parents make after an IEP or ARD meeting? So think about that. So one of the biggest mistakes parents make when it relates to a child with an IEP is not reading the prior written notice. So we've talked about prior written notice. And remember, IDEA requires school districts to submit a prior written notice to a parent in a timely manner. Again, that word timely. So that should be a couple of days, not months. While there are no specific timeline requirements, timeliness generally means before a school district takes any action and in a reasonable amount of time for parents to accept or reject the proposed services or actions. Prior written notices are used by school districts to inform parents in a concise, it's kind of like a summarized format of all its intentions to propose, actions to propose or refuse related to a child's IEP. You normally see a prior written notice at the conclusion of an IEP meeting. That's why I said it's usually at the back of the IEP, past those signature pages. So the IEP does not stop once you see those signature pages. School districts are required to give parents a notice with a minimum of 5 school days waiting period before any changes can be implemented. So a lot of times, especially here in my state of Texas, parents are asked if they want to waive their 5 days, and the IEP can be implemented immediately, or it can be implemented 5 school days later. And then remember, I told you to keep in that binder. Sometimes districts during COVID use prior written notice to detail changes to your child's IEP. Those prior written notices are very important to keep. It could be where you can use that documentation for compensatory services. Because during COVID, it was, new for everyone, and many districts use many different forms to change a child's IEP. But the biggest mistake parents make after an IEP is not reading their child's prior written notice. Read that prior written notice. If you have a disagreement with anything in the prior written notice, write your disagreement and have it attached to the prior written notice. So let's talk about important tasks to do after the IEP or the 504 meeting. This will all help to increase your meaningful parent participation at your next meeting. You want to update your binder or your online storage with a new copy of the IEP 504 plan or evaluation. You want to check in with teachers via parent conference, weekly emails. I even have parents who set up Google Docs that are shared with teachers where they can go in each week and ask questions and get answers. You want to contact the special education department head or team lead or 504 coordinator if you feel your child's IEP or 504 plan is not being honored or implemented as agreed upon. You want to read and file away all progress reports you get if you have a child with IEP. Remember, progress reports are updated and sent home at least minimally at the same time as regular report card are issued. If you do not receive a progress report, each grading period asks for one. Also, in your IEP meeting, you can discuss a schedule for getting progress reports. IDEA says minimally the law, they have to be sent in concurrence with regular report cards, which in most cases is every 6 weeks or 9 weeks. If you want them sent sooner, that's a discussion that can be discussed in the IEP meeting, that can be worked out and detailed in the IEP meeting. You want to check assignments, test scores, etc., to see that accommodations are being given to your child as directed by the IEP or 504 plan. You may ask teachers to write on there what accommodation the child used on the assignment. If your child is able to tell you, you can ask them, are they receiving their oral administration? Are they receiving copy of notes? But you need to check to verify that the IEP accommodations are being given to your child. And then you need to request an IEP, ARD, or 504 meeting if needed to discuss a concern. You have a right to request a meeting at any time. Minimally, you have to have one annually, but do not wait until the next annual meeting if you have a concern. You need to address it immediately, especially if you feel your child's IEP or 504 plan is not being honored or implemented as agreed. And then when I was talking to you about things you should be doing now, I mentioned data collection. Okay, so just like districts are collecting data, it's very important that parents are collecting data to bring to their IEP team or 504 plan team to support their request for their child. Proper data collection and tracking of your child's progress. It can be academic, behavior, or functional. It's integral part of the future of your child's IEP and 504 plan. Just like your parent input statement, just like any reports from outside service providers, this is also part of your parent input. You can record your child during the time she or he is completing schoolwork to provide data. You can do anecdotal records. You can do work samples at home on skills such as addition, subtraction, reading fluency. You can get any reports from any outside service providers, such as tutors or outside physical therapists, speech therapists, or occupational therapists. You can put together a portfolio, video, audio files to demonstrate competence on a particular skill, such as reading comprehension or reading fluency. You can provide copies of sample data collection sheets if you're working on IEP goals and objectives, academic or behavior. You can provide those to the committee. So just like we're asking the school for data collection, it's also a good for you to bring your own data. It increases your parent participation. So I've given you a couple of different ways to increase your parent participation when I've talked about preparing for your IEP meeting, key actions to take during your IEP or 504 meeting, such as reading your vision statement, and what to do after your IEP ARD or 504 meeting. If you do all of these things, it will help increase your parent participation. And the goal now is to have meaningful parent participation. Is not to have passive parent participation where you just go to the meeting and you're there in attendance and you don't ask any questions. Remember, to have meaningful parent participation, we want you to prepare a vision statement or parent input statement. We want you to ask questions, and we want you to bring data. So the whole point of my presentation today, and we're about to end, is to give you tips to help prepare for your child's IEP or 504 meeting, key actions to take during the meetings, and things to do after the IEP meeting. And this will help to increase your parent participation. And as I stated at the beginning of the presentation, parent participation has been a core tenet of IDEA's in 1997, the reauthorization in 2004, and now with the Andrew F. Supreme Court decision in 2017. So to help you do this, I'm also going to supply some tools and resources that are going to also be available to you. I'm going to give you a PDF or infographic of what is a vision statement. I'm going to give you 10 tips for a successful IEP meeting, and I'm going to give you a document where you can make an IEP at a glance template that you can give to teachers to help get to know your child at the beginning of the year. And it can also be used for 504 plan. So now I'm going to give you my contact information. Again, my name is Shamika Allen of Personalized Learning Solutions. My phone number is 214-799-6322. You can reach me my email, personalizedlearningsolutions@gmail.com. And then my website is www.personalizedlearningforall.com. I do have a Facebook page. Then I have a Facebook group that you can join called Special Education IEP and 504 Plan Support Group. And then you can also follow me on Instagram. If you do have any questions about anything that I said or presented in this presentation, you can reach out to me through email, or if you have a question you want to pose in the Facebook group, you can join, answer the membership questions, and pose your questions. So I hope everyone enjoyed this breakout session of appropriate planning for academic success. And I've given you some tips to help you with your prepare and be a better participant and have meaningful parent participation in your child's IEP ARD meetings or your child's 504 meetings. Thank you for attending Appropriate Planning for Academic Success. Enjoy the rest of the conference, and please, if you need to reach out to me for anything I've said in the presentation, you can reach me via email. Thank you.